So I'm going to talk to you about international e-commerce, specifically business to consumer. So, a lot of us like solving interesting problems, and we often find that when you solve one problem, another one, a deeper problem is unveiled, and that's the story of Yakit. So I'll go over that. So just a brief personal history. I started out in data science, moved into product. That's all. So the problem is huge. Direct-to-consumer international e-commerce is growing. People want products from all over the world. The world is flattening when it comes to e-commerce. But duties and taxes are still a pain. So how many people here have had to deal with duties and taxes to receive a shipment? So very few, right? And that's because we're in the US. There's a very high de minimis, so the threshold for duties and taxes is high. If you're in Canada, if you're in Europe, most other countries, you've probably felt this pain. The pain is you purchase something online, and then the postal service or customs clearance service tells you, hey, you have to pay a little bit extra duties and taxes to get the package. Package is delayed. It's a terrible customer experience. So this is an example from a merchant FAQ page. It says, you will be liable for all import duties, customs, and taxes. They will be due at point of or after delivery. And so it also goes on to say the merchant doesn't have any control over the duties, customs, and taxes. They can't advise you what the cost will be. They don't know. You don't know when you're purchasing. So this is a big hassle at purchase. The delivery experience is terrible. This is often the #1 customer complaint. Merchants are kind of stuck here. They could offer a duties paid solution, but then they have to bear the risk. They don't have a way of knowing what the duties and taxes are going to be ahead of time. They may be able to figure it out for one country, one product, but if they have a large SKU set and they're shipping to a lot of countries, this is a really intractable problem. So our solution, we had a joint venture with Swiss Post to solve this. Relatively straightforward application of machine learning. We take in the product description, the name, and then we do a text classification to go to the harmonized code, the product category. For example, in this case, outerwear jacket. And then from that, we get the harmonized codes and look up the duties and taxes in all of the major countries that people ship to. So with this solution, we know the duties and taxes in advance. So again, relatively straightforward application of machine learning, but the implications for the customer experience are pretty significant. So the result is this simple thing here. You see the shipping, you see the duties and taxes in the shopping cart. When you check out, you pay that amount, and that's it. So this is, again, something we're used to in the US. This is not something that the rest of the world is generally used to when they purchase cross-border. This is making cross-border as simple as domestic. And the shipment's delivered with no extra charges to the recipient or to the merchant, right? So this is how we started. Relatively simple problem. In a couple of years, everybody's going to be doing this, but it had to be done. It was a friction point. So now duties and taxes are solved, but we still have this core problem of international shipping is really expensive. So the current state is, if you're a merchant shipping to customers abroad, you have to choose a single carrier, one of the big end-to-end players usually. So maybe you have a price comparison engine like Shippo or ShipBob, one of these engines, and you choose an end-to-end carrier and ship the package. The problem is these end-to-end carriers are still quite expensive. And they also have limited coverage. So by limited coverage, what I mean is if you're a merchant and you have factories in different countries, you may want to start shipping from your factory in China because you have a market in Australia, what's called drop shipping. It's very difficult to open up a DHL account in another country, right? So this type of network has a sort of inflexibility to it when you're choosing one end-to-end carrier. So what we did is we broke apart the B2C logistics journey into 4 legs. So you've got your first mile. So let's say you're going from Palo Alto to London. You've got your first mile going to San Francisco Airport. You break it apart. The flight goes to London, clears customs with a customs clearance house, and then the final mile gets delivered to the end recipient. So here we're able to access the larger network of carriers, many of whom only work in certain lanes and you may not have heard of. So for the first mile, let's say we choose a less than truckload carrier. We're choosing based on price, based on timing. We do the same for the subsequent legs. So by creating this stitched together service, well, I'll just pause and say, like, this is in principle what Kayak does. If you go to kayak.com and you find a multi-airline flight that's a little bit slower but significantly cheaper than the single airline carriers. This is sort of what we're doing, but for packages, not for people. So the result is we get 6 to 9 day service, slightly slower than typical courier service, but the cost advantage is very significant, 20 to 70%. And it's super easy to turn on shipping points from other points in the world. So if you have a factory in the US and a factory in Hong Kong and you want to start shipping, 24 hours later, you're shipping. So this is the advantage of that network. So another way of putting this is we turn this mess of carriers, this fragmented market, into an API. And so in doing this, if you saw the Haven talk earlier, a lot of that resonated with me. I mean, we've seen the exact parallels to the difficulties in integrating with these carriers. They see it in the B2B sea shipping world. We see it in the air courier world. A lot of these guys, they use FTP systems, EDI protocols. It's like, it's a mess. So, and then, because of this, we run into all these classic route optimization problems distributed throughout the network. So there's the speed and aggregation trade-off. Depending on the speed of a given route, how do we figure out how much to bulk, when to bulk, and what are the trade-offs there? We also have some interesting problems in terms of predictive reliability. So depending on certain events, if there are different weather patterns or if we know certain flights are delayed, then we can reroute the package midway through its journey. So there's some interesting things that happen as we scale. The first thing is, as we open up the carrier marketplace, we see bidding efficiencies. So like the world of sea shipping that Haven is changing, these carriers, there's a lot of price opacity, right? There's a quote process, they give quotes in PDFs. It's a very similar sort of thing. So we see as we open this up, we're aggregating demand in terms of shippers for the carriers, and in return, they're bringing down their prices in order to compete. The other thing we get is, by having more carriers available, we improve the speed and reliability. And this is because the end-to-end players often have blind spots in certain regions. For example, in certain areas of Europe, in Italy, Spain, the end-to-end carriers often aren't the best. The Postal Service usually has a better delivery experience because if they fail to find you at your house, they can leave it at the local post office. You can pick it up. There are also some strange blind spots, like DHL doesn't pick up in Colorado. Don't know why. But these are the kinds of things that are not a problem when you aggregate a network. And the other thing about how we've built this network is you get aggregation at multiple points. So to illustrate that, you can think of Russian dolls. You have all of your shipments. If you're a shipper, you have all of your shipments. Let's say they're coats going to Canada. You put all of them in one larger box. That larger box goes to the nearest airport, gets aggregated with other merchants' boxes, and that goes to customs clearance. In this case, it's going to the UK, and we get economies of scale there too. So I guess the point of all this is, when you're putting together a network, you're taking this mess, you're taking this fragmented market, abstracting it into an API, but the way you put it together matters. So when we stitch these 4 legs together, we do it in such a way that you create bulk at the beginning, you aggregate it in the flow, and then the customs clearance agent breaks the bulk. So that's really important as we scale, because it means there are 3 points of aggregation. This is very normal to do if you're an end-to-end carrier, but if you have the data handoffs correct, you can do this across different carriers. So a bit about what's next. So we're growing the supply-side marketplace. We've got a lot of demand from shippers. As you guys all know, international shipping is growing. And so onboarding those means taking all these fragmented, these old-fashioned systems and trying to figure out ways to integrate with more of them more efficiently, doing less custom work. That's where the effort always is, right? It's never in the models. It's always in getting the data out, cleaning it. Some of the interesting things that we're encountering as well, surge pricing for holiday season. So our shipping pricing is pay-as-you-go. It's much more simple than most merchants are used to. Pay-as-you-go shipping, which lets us do things like, in peak season, guarantee a certain delivery time with surge pricing like you might see in Uber or Lyft. But it's quite new in the shipping world. One of the interesting things we found is people are willing to switch to this new pricing model, even though it's maybe a little more complex to understand, because they see that across the board, they get a fairer price. The other thing that's coming, there are all sorts of new transport methods that are emerging. You've got the proliferation of first-mile carriers, or as we think of them, first-mile carriers like Uber, Deliv, Postmates, and then eventually autonomous vehicles, drones. As these all come in, the network gains in capability. So we're trying to figure out, which of these makes sense to integrate into the network. Which of these are we going to see benefit from? And then the other thing that's on the horizon for us is predictive caching. So it's very simple to do logistics from one point to the rest of the world. But to get really fast logistics and to take full advantage of these new delivery methods that are coming, at some point you're going to have to keep items in warehouses in different locations. So figuring out how to do that, again, you can do this with most companies of a certain scale will do this with a supply chain, but figuring out how to do this across different carrier partners, organizing the data flow that way, if we can solve that problem in a very reliable way, this network can scale much faster than any single carrier. So, see, and then just to summarize some of the things we've learned along the way, always be looking for the next important problem. We solved the first problem. It really lowered the friction for international e-commerce. But then the second problem became really, really apparent. It's like, okay, people are buying now. Now what are they complaining about? If they're not complaining about the duties and taxes, it's the pricing. The second thing is, look for ways to make messy things into clean data sets. Again, this is the approach that Haven has. This is what Shippo is doing for single carrier stuff. Flexport is doing something similar. We're taking these old monolithic industries and doing the grunt work of integrating with their systems. And when you do that, you get something that's way more efficient, way more scalable. And then the last thing is you always go back to the customer experience. What's the shipper experience? What's the recipient experience? And that's been a constant guiding light for us through this. All stuff that everybody knows, but it's had some interesting implications for us. So let's see. This is maybe a bit briefer than I expected, but let's open it up for questions. And also, if you're interested, come talk to me afterwards. We're growing and we're hiring, so got some cool data problems to work on.
How open you're obviously having an interface with a lot of different vendors.
Yeah.
And that sounds like co-opetition because you're sort of trying to make them more efficient. How much of your integration has been scraping and how much of it has been APIs? And are they sort of in the chess game of open versus closed? They obviously, FedEx needs to keep its APIs open, right? There's certain legal things that say you have to show it's on bill of lading. So How easily have you been able to insinuate yourself?
Yeah.
And how defensible is that?
Yeah, so I mean, with difficulty comes defensibility. So some of the carriers, the larger players, have APIs, varying levels of quality. But where most of our work has gone into is the carriers that specialize in one region or one lane, and they're often very good, like up there with the best of the carriers in terms of service and price in that one lane. But because they're pretty isolated, they don't really have a way of aggregating demand from shippers. So when we go after these carriers, what we find a few different things. One, almost nobody has APIs. Often it's something archaic like EDI or FTP transfer. And the second thing is sometimes there's just really no way to get into their system. And so in that case, what we've done is we build interfaces that help them do their job. So when you're providing the customs clearance agent with all of the data, the paperwork, everything they need to do their job, they're going to use the interface to do their job, and then we'll get the events back. So sometimes to get the right data, you've got to get right into the process and become part of that flow. And the deeper we get into the process, the more control we have over it. The more we can say, okay, we're going to reduce the frequency of shipments, at this specific point in order to get the benefits of aggregation. So yeah, in terms of defensibility, we haven't seen anybody trying to do anything remotely similar, at least in this space. Very similar things we've seen in B2B. And the end-to-end carriers, of course, are starting to replace the worst legs of their service with postal systems. But yeah, we haven't seen anything big.
Do you layer other stuff like insurance or other value-added propositions on top of the end-to-end stuff?
We do. Yeah, insurance is a big part of it. And also, the duties and tax calculator that we started with sits on top of the entire system. And there's an app that goes in various e-commerce platform carts. So yeah, there's a lot of more value-added stuff we could do. We're exploring analytics, and comparing different services for larger consumers. But the main thing is the shipping. Right now we're just focused on the core shipping service.
So I was in China a few weeks ago, and I was talking to the guys at SF Express.
Mm-hmm.
And they have a very strong market lead where if I want to show you respect, I send you my contract via SF Express, and it's like a sign of honor.
Yeah, the branding
of
the.
Branding. It's like I charge you twice as much.
Yeah.
The user's experience, sure, they saw your app, your user interface, but the person that picks up the package or drops off the package is some third party. How do you maintain the consistency of brand experience that someone like an SF Express has?
I mean, it's tough, and often we're trying to use carriers for the last mile. If they have that brand experience and they're cost competitive, we'll use them, and the package will show up delivered by that service. We also take on the shipment support, the customer service. So we're sending updates with predictive ETAs and managing the customer's expectations as the package is in flight. But that is a challenge for us as we grow the network. Yeah.
So Alistair mentioned SF Express. They are one of our partners. So these are very...
Sorry, this is our CEO and founder, Jaggi.
So there are these companies like SF Express, Blue Dart in India. They're very good at what they do. And we can see that through the data. And they are our partners. So we see a lot more shipments going through SF Express than China Post, who is really very good themselves. So this is the power of data. So we are now tracking the turnaround time, what is the elapsed time on every leg. And it's not only the logistics, but the data that's coming back to us. So we are able to make that whole thing actionable to provide the end-to-end service that customers want.
Okay.
Cool.
If there are no other questions, we have time for a break now.
Cool.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much for stepping in and filling out that slot. I really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Alistair.